Hello, welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Saturday, December 7th, and we are just a little over 24 hours away from the New York Jets taking on the Miami Dolphins in an AFC East Week 14 showdown down in Miami out at Hard Rock Stadium tomorrow afternoon. Today, as we always do, another week, another game preview here for the New York Jets, episode 441 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. I thank you, as always, for joining me. What do we have in store this week? Week 14, 3-9 Jets, 5-7 Dolphins. We'll break it all down in today's matchup. As always, though, before we begin, let me tell you about our podcast partners, starting with our friends over at BetUS, America's favorite online sportsbook. As always, let's take a look at the odds for this one for tomorrow afternoon showdown out in Miami. The New York Jets come into this one 6.5-point road underdog. So Jets plus 6.5, Dolphins minus 6.5. Jets plus 250 on the money line, Dolphins at minus 300. The total set for this game is at 46. If you want to bet on this one or any of the other sports action, check out BetUS and use my link in the description of this video to get a 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. Also, our friends over at SeatGeek, are you in Miami and looking for last-minute tickets to this game and you haven't used SeatGeek before? Well, if that's the case, use promo code BUBSONSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. And this isn't just tomorrow's game. This isn't just NFL. This isn't just sports. You know the drill. Plays, concerts, shows, you name it. SeatGeek has it. First purchase, $20 off when you use my promo code Bubs on Sports. So get yourself out to some awesome events. And of course, our partners over at Huga House, if you want any of their awesome collection of hats, including some of their new arrivals, use promo code Bubs for 15% off any purchase. Another week, here we are, week 14. I showed you the odds there. 1 Eastern tomorrow, CBS. Dolphins come into this one as the home favorites. Let's take a look at some other analytics, some other numbers quickly here heading into this game. So the Miami Dolphins, according to ESPN's matchup predictor, is given a 56% chance of winning, while the New York Jets are given a 43.6% chance of winning. Again, Jets come into this one 3-9 at home, 3-9 on the season, 1-5 on the road. The Dolphins come into this one 5-7, while 3-3 at home. For the Jets, they have not won a road game. Their only road win this year, it's kind of crazy to think about, but their only road win this year came up against the Tennessee Titans in week 2, which, if it wasn't for Will Levis playing like Will Levis and making Will Levis decisions, the Jets probably would have lost that game too. You can make the case the Jets could honestly be a 2-win team right now if it wasn't for that one. And I mean, you can even go further and say that Houston lost if it was Houston win if it wasn't for the second half. They don't win that game either. But I'm not going to go down that road. It's already been a bad season. I'm not going to try and make it worse here. They're 3-9 heading into this one. Part of the fan base is rooting for losses. Part of the fan base doesn't even care. Part of the fan base still wants wins. It's basically 5 games left. Get out of these games relatively healthy. Find a way, see some positives in some of these young guys, and get on with the offseason and find your new coach and all that good stuff. And that's kind of just the overall thoughts here in the open before we really, dive into this one, and we'll get to the injury report. But just some overall notes here. These are two teams, the Jets and the Dolphins, that are kind of similar in the way that their season in terms of expectation wise has gone. And Miami, in a way, is very similar to what the Jets had to deal with last year at the quarterback position, right? Tua goes down early in the season. He then comes back recently here, but goes down with another one of those scary concussions. And that results to Tyler Huntley seeing playing time, Skylar Thompson seeing playing time, Tim Boyle, who myself and many other, pretty much every single NFL fan we don't have any clue how he still is in the NFL. He's now with the Giants, of course, is still around, but he gets playing time. So this is a Dolphins team that has seen 4 different quarterbacks see playing time. Same thing with the Jets last year. Rodgers, 4 snaps. Zach, Simeon, Boyle resulted in 7 wins. Dolphins could be on their way to one of those 7-win seasons. And even with the injuries, the Dolphins going into this year, and the Jets for that matter, were 2 teams that on paper were more talented than the Buffalo Bills. That's at least what it seemed like. With the Bills getting, talent-wise, they regressed in the offseason. At least that's what it seemed like. It looked like both of these teams were going to be fighting it out for the division. It was going to be a legitimate 3-team race where the Jets and the Dolphins, you kind of felt like maybe had the upper hand. And here we are, 12 games in, entering week 14 for both these teams. And for the Jets, they are 1 loss away from being eliminated. They've already clinched their 9th straight losing season. And for the Dolphins, they are pretty much going to have to run the table with 5 straight wins down the stretch here to even just give themselves a chance. There is no guarantees if they run the table, they make the playoffs. That just gives themselves a chance. So both of these teams, disappointing seasons, injuries for Miami at quarterback. For the Jets, not enough production out of Rodgers. Coaching staff's been terrible. We don't have to go down the list of things that has taken place off the field for the Jets, whether trade, 2 firings, change at play caller. We know all the moves that the Jets have made, and here we are. These 2 teams meet in week 14. Late in the season are these first 2 meetings for these teams, and you kind of went into the regular season and thought, man, this week 14 and week 18 matchup between both of these teams, because they play each other again at MetLife in the last week of the season, you thought to yourself, man, these could be 2 games that ultimately decide the division. Final 5 games, 2 of the final 5 were against each other. This could be it. And here we are, so far away from that being a reality right now. So just some opening thoughts there. I talked about the Jets' playoff chances, and I'll give you some other notes here. So for the Jets' playoff chances, a loss this week will officially eliminate them 14 straight seasons. They're already done. They're not making the playoffs, but it'll officially put the stamp on them. You'll see the E next to their name in the standings. It'll officially mark another double-digit losing season and another season sitting home in January and February. Now, some draft notes heading into this one, because we'll have an article on this up soon here on what to watch for over the next 5 games. As of right now, the Jets hold the 6th pick in the draft. So if the draft would to happen right now, Jets would hold the 6th pick. With 5 games left, the Jets have a 2.3% chance of getting the 1st overall pick, a 34% chance of getting a pick inside the top 5, and an 86.5% chance of receiving a pick inside the top 10. Obviously, at best, they can finish 8 and 9. At worst, they can close out the year 3 and 14. I think the Jets will probably finish somewhere with 5 wins. I think Jacksonville's winnable. We'll see kind of how the rest of it pans out. It's not a very easy schedule the rest of the way. They really might only finish with maybe 4 wins. We'll see. Take it week by week, see what happens. But those are just some of the updated draft standings, where they stand. They're going to have to tank because the teams in front of them are really bad, whether it's the Giants, the Jaguars. There are some really bad football teams this year. The Jets are bad, but can they get that bad? Only time will tell. Now, some other things as well. I feel like we could not go any longer in this episode without talking about the Jets' drought in Miami. And it's a real thing. The Jets have not won a game in Miami since 2014. December 28th, 2014 was the last time the New York Jets won a game in Miami. We all remember that one, 37-24. Rex Ryan's last game. The Geno Smith perfect passer rating game. You heard the report, remember, at the beginning of that one where Rex Ryan supposedly cleaned out his office knowing that he was going to be fired after that one. That was the last time the Jets won a game in Miami. Geno Smith, Ryan Tannehill, perfect 158.3 for Geno. Gave you some optimism going into 2015 that maybe he could find something and be the guy. He gets punched in the jaw. We all know what happens next. So That's the last time. Here we are. It's funny. Here we are talking about Rex Ryan potentially becoming the Jets coach again. And we still haven't won a game through Bowles, Gaze, Saleh, now Ulbrich. We still have not won a game in Miami since that point. So see if that trend breaks tomorrow. I will also throw this out there. The Jets have not scored a touchdown in Miami since 2021. And we'll get to more of that later because that wasn't even in an offensive touchdown, the last one, or one of the last ones that they scored. 2021 was the last one. Last year, of course, got blown out 30-0, got shut out. 2022, they lost 11-6, kicked 2 field goals. So this has been a team that not only just winning, but scoring touchdowns in Miami is very hard to come by. So let's take a look at the injury report for both these teams heading into this one. Jets got a couple big names on the report here. Doubtful, nobody's ruled out, but 2 doubtful players. Sauce Gardner dealing with a hamstring injury. He's doubtful for Sunday. And Breece Hall dealing with a knee is also doubtful. So 2 big name players, 2 big pieces to offense and defense for the Jets out in this game. So that opens up the door, which we'll talk about here more in a second. For guys like Brandon Echols, opens up the door for Isaiah Davis, more Braylon Allen. For those guys to get more run there at the running back position with Breece Hall most likely being out. This is smart. You kind of want to save the player, especially from Breece's perspective, because he's been dealing with a knee. Sauce, this just popped up. For Breece, this has been something that he's been dealing with now for the last couple weeks, even through the bye week. You want to kind of save the player from himself. You're 3-9. You're 1 game away from officially being eliminated. You've clinched another losing season. It's been a mess. 5 games left. At this point in the year, you just want your star players, guys like Breece, guys that play a position like running back, that especially a guy like Breece who's had history of injuries in the past. You want to just keep him healthy. Nothing stupid. Don't send him out there in a meaningless Week 14 game. So he'll be out tomorrow. Same thing with Sauce. As for the questionable players, Morgan Moses dealing with a knee and shoulder. Nothing stops him, man. He's a freaking warrior. Looks like he'll be good to go tomorrow. AVT ankle, Olu Fashanu toe, both should be out there. Quantez Stiggers dealing with an illness. Xavier Newman dealing with a groin. All your other questionable players for the Jets. Injury report. Lazard, Schweitzer, both back from IR. Mosley placed on IR. Lazard's back from IR. Mosley placed on IR. Looks like Mosley's time as a Jet could be over, which is a little upsetting. Awesome player, awesome leader during what has been kind of a really rough period for him of Jets football, but has remained consistent, been a great leader on and off the field. So could be the end of Mosley, placed on IR, ending his 2024 campaign. As for the Dolphins injury report, a whole lot of players questionable. Teron Armstead dealing with a knee, Anthony Walker dealing with a hamstring, Bradley Chubb knee, Cameron Goody knee, Kadar Kohu back, Raheem Mostert hip, Blake Ferguson illness. So we'll see how many of those guys are actually in there tomorrow, who's not. But definitely a more painful injury report for the Jets, I would say, with Breece and Sauce not out there tomorrow afternoon. So let's get into this one. Let's get into the Jets offense here against this Dolphins defense. Jets offensively come into this game ranked 31st in total offense, 29th in rushing offense, 23rd passing offense, and 26th in scoring offense. As for the Dolphins defense, they've kind of been up and down this year. They're the 7th ranked defense in football, 9th against the run, 9th against the pass, and tied for 14th in scoring. So you look at those numbers and you look at those rankings and you say to yourself, man, this Dolphins team, they are a top 10 defense, top 15 in terms of scoring as well. They've been inconsistent. They've had some highs. They've had some lows. They've had some games where they've looked really good. They've also had some games where they've looked really bad. Last week was one of those games against Green Bay. They talked about it after the game. They looked soft. Players came out and said it. Many in the media have said it. They look soft. They weren't ready. Cold weather. We know Miami struggles. So they've had some highs. They've had some lows. They had a stretch there during that 3-game win streak where they allowed 15 points, 19 points, 15 points. And then last week, they allowed 30. You look at some of their other losses. They let up 31 to Buffalo, 24 against Seattle, 31 to Tennessee, 28 against Arizona, 30 against Buffalo. So this is a defense that's had some really good weeks, whether it was 15-10 over New England, 23-15, 34-19, 34-15. Even in a loss to Indy, for the most part, kept them in check 16-10. Offense just couldn't do anything. So there's been some good weeks, but there's also been some really bad weeks. And we saw that last week. We saw it in the 2 Buffalo games. We saw it in that Tennessee game. We saw it in that Arizona game, especially late where the defense collapsed, defense fell apart. So kind of been interesting. I would say the numbers look better than the actual performance does. And for the Jets, I feel like I want to start here with the young players because I feel like that's got to be the main focus. And especially with Breece Hall missing this game, I look at the 2 running backs here, right? Braylon Allen this season has 67 carries for 240 yards, 3.6 yards per carry, and 2 touchdowns. Along with Braylon Allen, you also have, Kene Nwangu, who, of course, had the kick return last week. He'll also potentially get some reps there as that third running back for the Jets. But Braylon Allen being the 1, Davis being the 2, you'll get a rookie 1-2 punch. And as for Isaiah Davis, last week hasn't done much of anything this year, kind of just been developmental role for the most part. But this is a guy last week that 3 receptions, 3 targets. That pitch from Rodgers was considered a reception, 28 yards, 9.3 yards per completion, and a touchdown. Scored his first touchdown last week, was a creative play design in the red zone, found the end zone, and it was good to see him get more involved. So I think tomorrow, just right off the bat, a run defense this year that is ranked 9th, has had some highs, had some lows. You've got some big guys up front. Calais Campbell can get to the passer still. He can also stop the run. So there is their interior is some big bodies, big pieces, guys that can clog gaps, guys that can clog holes. Zach Sealer is another one that can clog holes, clog running lanes. So Braylon Allen's a guy that started the season really, really strong and recently has kind of tailed off a little bit. Not even recently. For the most part of this year, it's kind of tailed off. I think part of it is they've been losing, right? They haven't ran the ball much at all this season, even for Breece. Breece's most carries he's had in a game this year is 16. So if you can imagine Breece is getting those carries, Braylon Allen's getting less and less. They've been losing a lot of games. They've been forced to pass in a lot of games. There's been games where the run is working and then they go away from it and then it blows up in their face and they try and go back to it and it doesn't work. The handling of the run game this year for the Jets has kind of been just strange. I think part of it's the coordinator change, all that stuff. They're 29th in the NFL. But the one silver lining to Breece being out tomorrow is you get to see more Braylon Allen and you get to see a little bit more Isaiah Davis, which I'm excited to see too. We kind of know what Braylon Allen can bring to the table, just what we've seen. Isaiah Davis, we've barely seen. You saw a little bit last week. So see what those guys can do tomorrow. Get Braylon Allen involved too in the receiving game. I would like to see that. I think that's something that could be beneficial for him. We saw this receiving. We saw Braylon Allen early in the season have a lot of success catching passes out of the backfield. So try and do some of that tomorrow. We've seen Breece, of course, have a ton of success. Get the young guys involved. Like I always say, this is at this point in the season where you start to look at individuals. And the individuals are guys like Braylon Allen, guys like Olu Fashanu, guys like Isaiah Davis, heck, even Malachi Corley. I threw Malachi Corley on this list as well as another young player to watch. I don't expect Malachi Corley to get many opportunities because the Jets just don't do it. But we'll see. Now, the other young player I just talked about or just mentioned that I want to talk about, that's Olu Fashanu. This is a guy that's out of every young piece on this team right now. And I'm talking about not like the Breece Halls, the Garrett Wilsons, not those guys. Because they still are young, even though it's already year 3. More so like the Will McDonalds, like only year 2. But even just this rookie class, Olu has got to be one of these guys that down these final 5 games, while it's going to be a grind, and I, like many other Jets fans, can't wait till this season's over so we can just start fresh, find your new coach, find your new general manager, start this new era, wipe this slate clean, and start over and try and figure this thing out. The one thing that I think you do got to look forward to over the next 5 games is seeing Olu's continued growth. And last week was a really, really positive outing for Olu. And I think it showed even more so for Olu last week, because when Morgan Moses came out of the game last week due to an injury, Carter Warren came in and immediately was getting beat, immediately was struggling. And the one constant all day was Rodgers' blind side. 42 pass block snaps for Olu against Seattle, did not allow a single sack or pressure. Now, since taking over the starting role against the Colts in Week 11, after Tyron Smith was placed in IR, pretty much ending his Jet career and potentially NFL career, Olu over the last 3 weeks has had a 77.5 PFF grade, which is 16th among offensive tackles through the last 3 weeks from Week 11, going through Week 13 here, heading into Week 14. For a rookie that has sat, learned, observed, seen what Morgan Moses can do, seen what Tyron Smith can do, 2 guys that have an excellent wealth of knowledge, you can see the early returns for Olu are very, very promising. And I feel like it's only fitting that if Olu does pan out, right? Joe Douglas's first round pick was Mekhi Becton in 2020. It didn't work. His last first round pick was Olu Fashanu. That kind of summed up Douglas's 6 years. Everywhere in between, he was trying to figure out the left tackle. Never figured out. Finally, maybe got the guy in Olu. Now he's not here. Right? Douglas isn't here anymore. But maybe that was his parting gift. Either way, though, and I've been saying this too. I was talking to somebody about this yesterday. This is how I try and view Olu. Maybe this is the optimistic view, but for a while now, really going back to DeBrickashaw Ferguson, the New York Jets have not been able to find their franchise left tackle. You can even make the case, too, since Mangold retired, they've had bumps at center. Now you look at the 2 spots here, 2024. You got Tittman, who feels like he's a cornerstone piece at center. And now Olu, early signs. Again, it's early, but they're very, very positive. And I don't think you should be really surprised if you're a Jet fan. This was a guy that 11th overall pick, was arguably the best pass blocker in the draft. Joe Alt was the better, well-rounded offensive lineman, but Olu was the best pure pass blocker. And early signs are Olu's got to improve in the run game 100%. That was one of his weaknesses at Penn State. He's not as good of a run blocker as pass blocking is his specialty. But you hope as time goes on, the run blocking will be good. And let's be honest here. You can live with Olu being an average run blocker if he is a really good to elite pass blocker, because that's ultimately what you need at your left tackle, is protecting your quarterback's blind side. But my point is that at least you go into this offseason and the whole quarterback left tackle puzzle has been something the Jets haven't been able to solve in years. At least, potentially, you go into this offseason with one half of that puzzle complete for the first time in a very long time, feeling like you've got something at left tackle with Olu, and we want to continue to see that here over the next couple games. So that's another young player to look for. Talked about Davis, talked about Allen, talked about Corley, talked about Olu. Rodgers, I mean, at this rate, you want to say these 5 games are it for him in terms of like he's got to perform well. You guys know, we know what Rodgers is at this point. Yeah, we know what he is. This season, 262 of 419, 62.5% completion percentage, 2,627 yards, 6.3 yards per attempt, 19 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 48.4 QBR, and 87.5 passer rating. I will say this, did some digging here. Rodgers against Miami in his career, he's had a lot of success. He's 3-1 in his career against Miami, including 3 straight wins. And if you recall, one of those wins came in 2022 after the Jets lost to the Jaguars on Thursday night. That debacle Thursday night, Zach got benched. And going into that weekend, it looked like the Jets were done. Things fell their way. Part of it was Rodgers going on the road and beating the Dolphins. Of course, it didn't matter because the Jets got blown out the next week anyway in Seattle. But he actually helped the Jets with that win. So last time was in Miami, helped the Jets stay in the hunt. This time in Miami, will he help the Jets to a win? We'll see. But in his career, he's completed 60.3% of his passes against the Dolphins for 1,014 yards. That's 7.2 yards per attempt, 7 touchdowns, 2 picks, 92.9 passer rating. You know, you just look at Rodgers' numbers through his career and you look at this year, he's averaging 6.3 yards per attempt. 6.3 yards per attempt. That is awful. You even just look 7.2 in his career against Miami. You go back and look at his previous numbers. Everything is like a 10-yard offense. And I said this last week and I'll say it again. You know, tomorrow, can we see some deep shots? Early in the game, I will say last week, they were actually stretching the field a little bit. And I give them credit because these games are so bad to watch and they're tanking at this point. So at least if you're going to tank, I mean, the Jets themselves aren't tanking, but in terms of like draft positioning, right? At least if you're in tank mode from a fan's perspective, at least you want to watch a somewhat entertaining tank. We got an entertaining tank for a quarter last week, and that was it. So at least take some deep shots, take some chances. The games are already unenjoyable. Try and make it a little bit more entertaining, interesting by stretching the field. Because these 10-yard, these 1-yard screens, 1-yard flats to Devontae Adams just isn't going to cut it. So there's my thoughts on Rodgers. There's not much more needs to be said there in what has been a horrible season for him. Now on to Garrett Wilson, and I will talk about Will McDonald as well. But I want to get to Garrett Wilson because, like I said, at this point in the season, you're looking at a lot of the individuals. And Garrett Wilson statistically has got some milestones that he could be potentially hitting here. So on the season, Garrett Wilson's got 74 receptions for 763 yards, 5 touchdowns, 10.3 yards per reception. He's 7th in the NFL in receptions, tied for 18th in the NFL in yards, and tied for 16th in the NFL in touchdowns. So this has been a guy that I think has put himself into top 15 wide receiver in the NFL. I think without a doubt. Top 20, definitely top 15, top 17, somewhere around there. What Garrett Wilson continues to do to me week in and week out with everything that's happened in his career is just impressive. That's really the best way to put it. And this is a guy in his career that has had to deal with, you know, Mike White, Joe Flacco, Zach Wilson, Tim Boyle, Trevor Siemian. The list goes on and on and on. Now Aaron Rodgers, who is clearly not the same player, just turned 41, will be 41 on tomorrow, or will be 41 entering tomorrow's game. Like 252 receptions, 2,908 yards, 12 touchdowns, 11.5 yards per reception in his career through his first 2.5 seasons now. It's crazy to see those numbers. And Garrett's on pace for another 1,000-yard season. He's on pace for his 3rd straight 1,000-yard season in 3 years. It's awesome to see what this guy continues to do. And I'll give you some numbers here. So he can hit some career high here over the next couple weeks. And this week's kind of the start of that watch, right? Down the stretch here, final 5 games. Now, when you look at his touchdowns, he's already hit a career high. He had 7 touchdowns his first 2 seasons combined. He's already got 5 here. I wouldn't be surprised if he ties that number or even gets over it. But either way, he's already got 5. That's a new career high this season. Now, over the next month here, his receptions and yards could become career highs as well. Wilson needs 22 receptions to surpass his previous high of 95, which was last season. Or I apologize. To 95. Yeah, last season, rather. So he needs 22 receptions to hit 96 receptions on the season, which would set a new career high. And 341 yards to reach a new receiving yards milestone. His career high is 1,103. If he gets 341 the rest of the way here, he'll get up to 1,104. He'll beat that new career high. Now, Talk about the receptions. He needs 22 to top his career high. Wilson also needs 26 receptions if he wants to hit 100 on the season, which he will become the second Jet in franchise history to have 100 receptions in a season. As we all know, the first and only to do that was Brandon Marshall in 2015. So everything that we expected Garrett Wilson to accomplish in this season, pretty much a lot of it, is still right there for the taking in terms of more yards than he's had, more receptions, touching 100 receptions, which we expected after, Brandon Marshall in 2015. We thought that might be a record that could be up for grabs here. I don't know if he'll hit Marshall's record exactly, but there is a chance he gets to 100. So something to look for here over the next couple weeks. So let's shift into the defensive side of the football here for the New York Jets against this Dolphins offense. Dolphins or the Jets come into this game defensively. They are the third-ranked defense in football, 20th against the run, second against the pass, 15th scoring defense in football. As for Miami, their offense, pretty middle of the pack, similar to the Jets. 19th total offense. Well, I shouldn't say that. Jets offense is below average. Miami's is about average. 19th total offense, 22nd total rushing offense, 18th passing offense, 24th in scoring offense this season. Obviously, so many different quarterbacks, 4 different quarterbacks, Tyler Huntley, Tim Boyle, Skylar Thompson. Tua got hurt, now back to Tua. We'll start with Tua. Obviously, the injuries are a major concern. Potentially one more concussion away from it being career-threatening. You can make the case the last one was already career-threatening. I don't want to go down that road, though, right now. Just from a game perspective, Tua, 207 completions this season on 278 attempts, completing it at a very high 74.5% clip. 2,125 yards, that's 7.6 yards per completion. 15 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, a 59.7 QBR, and a 108 passer rating. We all kind of know what you're going to expect out of Tua. It's a guy that's going to, obviously, they've attacked underneath a lot more with Jonnu Smith, which potentially will open more things up over the top. But we know what Tua, we know this Dolphins offense, a vertical offense that is not afraid to throw it deep, not afraid to take chances, not afraid to stretch the field. This year, a lot of teams have began to kind of just completely take Tyreek Hill out of the game plan. He's not like running wide open like he's been in the past. Teams have really kind of locked him up, which is open for Waddle, who's still had a very productive season so far. Tyreek Hill down for his standards. Part of that's the quarterback play. A lot of it, though, is the defense and Tua just not being able to get him those balls deep, find him open, scheme him open. So we'll be interesting to see how that all goes down tomorrow. But look, there's no doubt since Tua's return, this team's been significantly better than what they were obviously dealing with. They were really, he came back in week 8 and they lost the back-to-back games in week 8 and week 9 by a combined 4 points. And really that Arizona game, you could pin a lot of that on the defense. They were up, 27-18. They were up 20-10. Obviously, the Cardinals did end up having that safety, but there was, the big 9, a couple big drives to get a field goal, to get touchdowns for Arizona. So Tua, for the most part in that game, did fine, did good enough to win. Buffalo, obviously, going up cold weather was tough. Kind of a back and forth game. Didn't get the job done. Then they won 3 straight last week. A lot of it was the defense. So we'll see kind of how Tua comes out in this one. But still, despite missing time, 8 games, 15 touchdowns, you kind of know what Tua is. He's a slightly above average quarterback, I would say. He's top, he's 15 to 12 maybe, I think around there probably. But somebody I really want to talk about here is Jonnu Smith. And before I even get to Tyreek Hill, before I even get to Jalen Waddle, before I even get to Brandon Echols, because he is a name to look for in this one because the history there with Tua and the interceptions, we'll get to that. But Jonnu Smith, we've got to talk about. This is a guy right now that is just on an absolute heater at this moment. And really, statistically, has been one of the best tight ends, not only in the AFC, but one of the best tight ends in the NFL. You look at Jonnu Smith's numbers this year, and the reason why Jonnu Smith, to me, is such a big guy to watch tomorrow is because the Jets this brand of the Jets defense over the last couple seasons historically has not been able to stop tight ends. And a guy like Jonnu Smith, with guys like Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill on the outside, so much focus being on those guys, Jonnu Smith's a guy underneath that has been racking up a ton of yards because defenses are so focused on the other playmakers. It's opened the door for Jonnu Smith. This season, Jonnu Smith's got 58 receptions for 648 yards, 11.2 yards per reception, and 4 touchdowns. He's 4th in the NFL among tight ends in receptions, 4th among tight ends in yards, and tied for 5th among tight ends in touchdowns. Now, why Jonnu Smith right now, too, is such a threat is the last 3 games, he's been dominant. 25 receptions in the last 3 games, 301 yards, 12 yards per reception, and 3 touchdowns. So 301 of his 648 yards have come in the last 3. 3 of his 4 touchdowns have also come in the last 3. And 2 of his last 3 games have been of over 100 yards receiving. So Jonnu Smith's whole body of work this year has been impressive. But you talk about a guy that's in a groove right now, that has found a rhythm right now, that is connecting on all cylinders with his quarterback. Jonnu Smith is that guy. And while everybody will talk about Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and rightfully so, we'll talk about them here in a second, you can't go without mentioning Jonnu Smith and what he's done for this Dolphins offense, especially recently. And this Jets defense has had struggles against tight ends. So how will they go out there tomorrow? What do we see tomorrow? That will be a big, big matchup to watch for. Now, on the topic of Jonnu Smith, you've got to move into the whole Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill combination. And Tyreek Hill this season, I think from a fantasy perspective, has been very disappointing. You know, I know a lot of Tyreek Hill fantasy managers that have been disappointed. And I also just statistically, his numbers are down. You're not seeing those highlight reel plays where it's big 50, 60-yard plays. You're not seeing him, have some of these plays where he catches it for about 5, 10 yards and is able to turn it upfield for another 20 to 30 like we've seen. And when I was talking about Tua, like I said, you haven't seen Tyreek Hill this season have those big plays where it just takes the top off a defense. And a lot of that's just the attention to detail that these defenses have had. They've really tried their best to just take Tyreek Hill out of the game plan and let these other guys beat you. And that's opened the door for a guy like Jonnu Smith, who's been open a lot underneath because teams are so focused deep on keeping Tyreek Hill contained. Hill this season down year for his for his standards. 55 receptions, 654 yards, 11.9 yards per reception, 4 touchdowns. When you look at Waddle this year, he's kind of on par for what he is. He's a 1,100 yard receiver. That's kind of what he is. And it's a guy that's, usually around the 70 reception mark. Perfect number 2 to a guy like Tyreek Hill. But Waddle this season, they're both neck and neck. 45 receptions, 601 yards, 13.4 yards per completion reception, 2 touchdowns. Together, combined, Hill and Waddle, despite Hill not having his best season, still 2 very, very dominant players that you have to watch for. Combined, they have 100 receptions on the season, 1,255 yards, 12.6 yards per reception, and 6 touchdowns. And the Jets, obviously, without Sauce tomorrow. DJ Reed the last couple weeks seems like he's banged up, hasn't played his best at times recently. So how does he come out tomorrow? There's also been some times where Miami's gotten the best of Reed when he's been here in his time here. So no Sauce, Reed a little banged up. Last couple weeks struggling, hasn't always played his best against Miami. How does that all play out? Like, the Jets are a little banged up there in the secondary. But something I look for, though, is Brandon Echols tomorrow. And I got to bring up Brandon Echols because I feel like we wouldn't be talking Jets Dolphins if it wasn't for Brandon Echols, right? So Echols will get the start tomorrow in place of Sauce. Sure, you'll see some Stiggers as well. which nothing against Stiggers, but last week, first big opportunity, kind of a rough spot. DK Metcalf pass interference, first play, tough spot for him, right, to come in and face against DK. But how would Stiggers fare tomorrow against either of these guys will be interesting. Won't be easy, obviously. But Eccles, history tells us he's going to have some success against Tua. Now, I have to talk about this first. The Jets have 2 interceptions this year. They haven't had an interception since week 5 against the Minnesota Vikings in London. That was the last time the New York Jets had an interception. The last time. Crazy to think that Robert Saleh, Joe Douglas were still here. Devontae Adams was not a Jet. Hassan Reddick still wasn't reported. Nathaniel Hackett was still the offensive coordinator the last time, or they still the offensive play caller, rather, the last time the Jets had an interception this season. That's crazy. When you put it like that, that's crazy. We talk oftentimes about the Jets not making the playoffs since like Obama's first term. Well, last time Jets had an interception, Robert Saleh was still the head coach for at least another day before he obviously got canned that Tuesday after that game. But Eccles has 2 interceptions this year. The Jets as a team have 2 interceptions. Eccles has both of them. On top of this, he has 5 interceptions in his career. 2 of them are pick sixes. Both of those are against the Dolphins and Tua. His first pick 6 came in 2021. I talked about in the beginning of the show that Eccles and the Jets, the Jets' last touchdown in Miami was 2021, Eccles pick 6. 2023, last year, Eccles also had a pick 6 against Tua in the Black Friday game. That was right before halftime. They were going to go in 10-6. We know what happens next. They end up going in down, 17-6 after the Fail Mary after that. But he also had a pick 6 against him last year. So 2 pick 6s in his career, both against Tua. And has the last Jets touchdown in Miami back in 2021. Now, I'll also say this. He also has an interception against Brady. And if you remember, Eccles went up to Brady after that game and asked him to sign the football. So crazy that Eccles kind of has success against Florida quarterbacks. 3 of his 5 interceptions come against quarterbacks that are located in Florida or were located in Florida now with Brady retired. But he's a guy to look for tomorrow. Not only is he filling in for Sauce, but he's also a guy that's had success against Tua. All jokes aside, though, Eccles is a solid depth piece that kind of has a knack for the ball, can come in, get a pick, and come in, be productive and get the job done and do enough. One other thing I'll look for here is just this Jets run defense against this Dolphins run game. Dolphins come into this one 22nd in the NFL in the rushing attack. Jets are 20th. So very similar in terms of where they rank. Jets 20th ranked rush defense, Dolphins 22nd ranked rushing offense. So will kind of be interesting to see which one potentially breaks through tomorrow. But Devon Achane's obviously a big story going into tomorrow. This season, 139 carries, 576 yards, 4.1 yards per carry, and 3 touchdowns on the ground. And through the air, he's been really good. And that's something that I'm looking for tomorrow is, how do the Jets contain Achane? Because not only do you have to worry about Hill and Waddle, you've also got Jonnu Smith now coming into the fold. He's been red hot. And Devon Achane's been phenomenal this season as a pass catcher. Last year, this was a guy that just had over 100 receiving yards. This season already has got 429 receiving yards on 57 receptions for 6 touchdowns and 7.5 yards per completion or per reception. This is a guy in Devon Achane that in terms of dual threat has taken over this year. Last year was really just a runner, get into the end zone, 800 yards was phenomenal. Big yards per carry type guy. This year has kind of turned into a dual threat back where he can be a threat as a pass catcher out of the backfield as well. After playing just 11 games last year, had 197 receiving yards, 800 rushing yards this season, 12 games in, already 429 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns. This is a guy that's got 9 touchdowns total on the year. has a knack for getting to the end zone, and we saw that last season as well, where he had 11 in 11 games total, has got 9 this year in 12 games. So he's somebody you definitely got to look for. And one other stat I want to talk about, that's Will McDonald. Talked about Garrett. Will McDonald's got a chance to make some history of his own over the next couple weeks, to put himself into Jets history over the next couple weeks, similar to Garrett, as I talked about with the receptions. Will McDonald right now, 10 sacks on the season. That leads the Jets and is tied for 4th in the NFL. Obviously, his best season as a Jet last year, developmental role. This season, first time he's hit double-digit sacks in a season, so that's obvious. 2 sacks against Seattle, got that total back up to 10. So here's some notes. 3 sacks away from beating Quinnen Williams' 12 sacks, which he had, of course, in 2022, which would put Will McDonald in front for the most sacks in the last decade by a Jets defender. So that's number 1. If Will McDonald hits 13, he can get into first for most sacks in the last decade. Now, as for the other number, Will McDonald, with 5 games left, got 10. If he can find a way to get 4 more sacks, or even, let's just be honest, 3.5, he would enter into first in Jets history for the most sacks by a second-year player with 14. John Abraham right now currently holds the record with 13 in 2001. So another Will McDonald number. Like I said, looking at individuals this point in the season, and Garrett Wilson, Will McDonald, 2 guys that are chasing down some Jets history. So we'll see if they can get that here over the next 5 games. And that's it. Another game preview in the books. I appreciate you all so much for tuning in. Dolphins 6.5-point favorites. I think they cover this one. I got the Dolphins winning 27-17. The Jets winning in Miami just does not happen right now. And until they prove to me that they can win in Miami, I'm not going to pick them. So that's just kind of the way it is. So 27-17, Dolphins win. Hopefully we see some good out of some of the young guys. And yeah, I think that's really all you're kind of looking for. At this point, 5 games left. Let's see some progress from the young players. Walk out of there healthy, already a little banged up. Keep these top tier guys healthy. Ride into the offseason healthy. And we'll see how it all plays out. So that'll do it. We'll be back tomorrow right after the game, recapping it all. As always, appreciate you so much. Make sure to like and subscribe. Talk to you soon. JTS. Jets, Jets, Jets.